Good afternoon. This is Rich Nass from Open Systems Media, and I am here for this week's installment of 5 Minutes With. This week, our special guest is Simon Davidman of Imperis Software.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, Rich.
How are you today, Simon?
I'm very good, thanks. And you?
Good. I'm fine, thank you. Thank you very much for asking. Okay, we have 5 minutes for this interview, so we're going to dive right into some of my questions, and hopefully you have some answers for me. I read your bio, and it said you are a serial entrepreneur, and frankly, I don't know what that means. What does it mean to be a serial entrepreneur?
What does that mean? Well, I guess it means I've had many jobs over my career, but really it's that I've been through several different sort of businesses and transitions. I mean, in my background, I'm an engineer, a technology guy. I love new things. I like solving problems, and I like solving customers' problems. And so I guess I've spent my life finding issues that customers have, and then being an engineer, I want to try and solve them. And I started off on the engineering side of things and got involved with technologies around EDA and simulation. But it's not just the engineering. More recently, I got more involved on the business side of things. An example of that was my previous company, Co-Design. I worked with a fantastic technologist who had this brilliant concept for evolving hardware description languages, but he was very academic about it, and I brought the business side of it and worked with him as an entrepreneur to try and not just work on the technology, but actually try and work on the business aspects to try and evolve his concepts so they could be adopted and accepted by everybody, and which it was very successful with System Verilog, which meant working not just with technology, but with committees and industry and users and all sorts of different things. And so I guess as a serial entrepreneur, it's finding a problem, working to solve it, making it adopted and being successful, and then moving on to the next one. So I guess that's what I've been doing.
Okay, that sounds like a great explanation. So you've been in the industry, in the EDA industry for quite some time, and as we both know, there's been a ton of consolidation, generally the big guys gobbling up the smaller guys. Do you see that trend continuing?
Well, yes, it's definitely been a trend. Do I see it continuing? The reason that it happens is that typically, it's the sort of smart technologists that come up with something new, and it might be useful, it might not be useful. But most often in a big company, you have to be focused on your existing customers and what it is to keep them happy. Whereas a young company or an individual can actually do something radical and do something different. And that's really, in the electronic design automation industry, there are tremendous challenges to be solved always, and there's always more challenges. And typically that is done by individuals coming up with a different way of doing something, putting a team together, maybe in a university, maybe in a startup, maybe as hobbyists, and they get some sort of momentum behind the idea, and it either falls by the wayside because nobody really wants the technology, or a group of people start liking it and adopting it. And what happens in EDA is that those that are successful, their growth accelerates, and they build a sort of a base of customers that are relying on what they do to get the chips out. And once they start getting to a level of success, that's when the bigger companies get interested, because they almost use the sort of startup business to let technologies fail or succeed, and as they succeed and start to become profitable, the big companies can then adopt acquire the companies, pick up the technologies, and use their strengths, which often is the sort of sales channels and working with the customers and really providing sort of security to the customer and longevity that the technology is going to exist for a long time and be supported. So the small companies tend to come up with the ideas. If they're successful, the big companies can then capitalize on that and make them very sort of successful in the customer base. So I think that yes, there's been a lot of consolidation. There's always going to be consolidation, I think. And will it continue? I think it will, because the problems, they're changing, but they're not going to go away. For example, when I started, it was how can you simulate something with 10,000 gates because you wanted to know that it worked. Now, we've got systems with multiple processors in them where actually a lot of the challenge of electronic design, electronic product design, is actually getting the software to work on it. And there's lots of startups building technology to do with debuggers and analysis, and getting software to make sure that it's safe in systems, the security aspects in software. And I see that the EDA industry sort of evolving as it has done from sort of CAD through to electronic product design, and that's encompassing more and more of the software aspects. And so I think that absolutely there's new companies building technology around software and technology around security, and I think there's going to be consolidation. I mean, most recently, Synopsys, the largest EDA company, has been acquiring technology in this sort of security IP space and the software space. So I think the industry is evolving, but I think the business model of small companies building technologies, getting them to be successful, and then consolidating into the larger ones, absolutely it's going to continue, yes.
Okay, we're just about out of time, but I'd like to stick with that subject of consolidation. And you've been through a lot of that yourself. I personally have been through a bunch of acquisitions, and it often spooks people, whether they're on the acquiring side or on the side of being acquired. Do you have any advice for somebody who's sitting on either side of that fence?
Yes, I think one of the things that I've learned, and I think I've been involved with 7 or 8 acquisitions actually, very successfully, is that you have to, if you're on the technology side of things, you're being acquired, you have to get your technology sort of bedded into the acquiring company, and make sure that it's going to sort of survive and be useful to that company. That's why they've acquired it. And then if you're not happy in that group or there's slight changes, you've got to go find something useful to do in that big company, because acquisitions aren't about the technology alone. They're about the technology and the people. And often the people that are acquired end up doing much better things in the larger company. So I think that it's unsettling to be acquired, but most companies are pretty good at looking after people being acquired, but there's always going to be unsettling things and job overlaps and things like that. But the bottom line is, in our industry here in the EDA, that everybody's a sort of technologist, and there's always more to be done than can be done, and so you've got to find something useful to do in that new company.
There you go. I think that's very good advice. I'm afraid we're out of time. That was 5 Minutes with Simon Davidman of Imperis. Thank you for your time, Simon. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much for having me, Rich.